When you read the book of Joshua and the book of Judges and you look at the settlement period, that time period when Israel is coming into the land, it can be a little difficult to read because it does seem to give us two different pictures. Joshua 6 through 11 gives us this picture of Israel pouring into Canaan in one great wave, 3 lightning fast campaigns in the middle, to the south, to the north, and you have this conquest that was very quick and very bloody, and strong emphasis on complete. The conquest was complete. It was all the land was taken. In Joshua 12, it lists how all the land is taken. Then in chapter 13, you get the list of the unconquered land. Kind of curious as well. In Judges, each tribe is capturing its own inheritance against Canaanites who are still in the land. The fighting is sporadic as they come into contact with them. Cities that were conquered in Joshua are now in Canaanite hands in the book of Judges. And the conquest is a slow, bloody, and incomplete kind of picture. So normally when you have that kind of contradiction or contrast, you want to find something to help you read it. So archaeology has always been a place people have turned to try to help understand the biblical record. And there's good news and there's bad news as far as the archaeological record is concerned. The good news is something is happening in 13th century Canaan. There is major upheaval in the Promised Land in the 13th century. A number of towns that Joshua lists as destroyed are in fact destroyed. Archaeologists have found a destruction layer that corresponds to the 13th century. Dabir and Lachish and Eglon and Hatzor all show destruction levels in the 13th century, right when we want to put Joshua taking the Promised Land. Even Hatzor, this great site of biblical proportions, literally biblical proportions. It's a huge site. Part of the highway goes over part of the ancient Canaanite city of Hatzor. There are some estimates that say if you lived in a city in ancient Canaan, 50% of you lived in Hatzor. That's how big this city was. And it actually has a conflagration layer for the 13th century. I know that excites you. Conflagration means destruction by fire layer. And the Bible actually says Hatzor was destroyed by fire. So there's this wonderful resonance there. So that's the good news. The bad news is 2 of the stories for which the book of Joshua gives the most detail don't help us out as far as the reading is concerned. Jericho, for example, is a very problematic site. There is no evidence of occupation in the late Bronze Age. There is, would have been a ruins at the time of the conquest. The walls of Jericho, they're spoken out with such detail. There's no evidence that there was any occupation there. Now, some have speculated maybe the evidence has eroded away, and certainly over time a lot of sites fall victim to erosion. Usually you have more than nothing. There's nothing at Jericho to help us. The city of Ai is even more problematic. The other city we get great detail about. The city of Ai actually has evidence it was unoccupied for about a 1,000-year period that would correspond to this time period that we're talking about for Joshua, from about 1700 to 700 BC. Nobody lived at the site of Ai, the name which in Hebrew just means ruin. So that's a problem. Joseph Callaway actually was a professor at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, an archaeologist, and was probably a real difficult thing for him. He was one of the major excavators at the site of Ai, and great Baptist professor who want to show how archaeology resonates so clearly with the Bible, and he hits the one site that actually caused some biblical record, caused some problems in reading the biblical record. So that was a tough thing for him. He wrote a very funny paper dealing with that issue. After the destruction levels that I talked about at Dabir and Lachish and Eglon and Hatzor and these cities that show destruction layers, after the destruction layers, Canaanites lived there. So you would hope to find that Canaanite occupation, destruction, Israelite occupation. You don't have that. You have Canaanite occupation, destruction, Canaanite occupation. So that's problematic. There are new settlements that are in the hill country, this area where Israel came in for that first time in the hill country. So maybe we would want to think of those as ancient Israel. The archaeology doesn't help us a whole lot there either, because those new settlements have some features that look like Canaanites. The material culture, the houses, the pots, etc., look a lot like Canaanites at the time. So we have Joshua saying one thing, we have Judges saying one thing, we have the archaeology saying one thing, and not surprising, this has led to different theories on the settlement period. 3 different theories that I guess I want you to be most aware of are, first of all, the conquest theory. The conquest theory was started by W.F. Albright, sometimes called the Albright-Wright-Bright theory. He had a student named George Wright and John Bright, so they didn't meet. I guess you had to rhyme to study with him, I don't know. But I would say that the story of the conquest theory takes the story in Joshua very, very seriously. He takes the biblical record of Joshua very seriously. Albright went out of his way to try to make absolutely clear some plausible explanations. Maybe when the Bible says Ai, it's referring to the site of Bethel, which was a major city in the late Bronze Age, and maybe a scribe switched the I's. Maybe Ai was used as an outpost, but he tries to find some plausible explanations for that. The reality is the archaeology just doesn't match up. Sometimes you can be there might be some issues, but it really doesn't answer all the questions well. The second theory I want you to be aware of is the peaceful infiltration of desert tribes. This was started by Martin Note. He put this forward. I would argue he takes the biblical record of Judges very seriously, that Israel moved in out of the desert, settled in the easy-to-conquer hill country where there really weren't any cities, and as those people came into contact with indigenous Canaanites, you started to have those local bouts of fighting. That works, that fits the story in Judges, but it doesn't explain the archaeology, which says why these new settlements look a little like Canaanite culture with the four-room house and some of the pottery that they have there. The third theory of the settlement period comes from George Mendenhall. It's what's called the peasant revolt theory, or I suppose if you don't like it, you can call it the revolting peasant theory. I would argue that where Albright takes Joshua very, very seriously and Note takes Judges very, very seriously, Albright takes the archaeology very, very seriously. Mendenhall takes the archaeology very, very seriously. It is almost a Marxist revolution that he foresees coming in this late Bronze Age Canaanite period. He believed that the poor in Canaan were sick and tired of being oppressed by their Canaanite overlords and revolted, and some of those cities fell by force, and those are the destructions that you see at Debir and Lachish and Eglon. And that once they were overthrown, people settled on those cities again, and they were Canaanites, so they stayed there. Some of them may have fled up in the hills and built their settlements up there. So Mendenhall believed that all the settlements we see in that late Bronze Age period are indigenous Canaanite, that we don't have anyone coming in from the outside, that the story of the Exodus was an origin myth for Israel. Probably the greatest attack on that, apart from a faith attack, probably the greatest weakness to Mendenhall's perspective, he never explains why indigenous Canaanites would all of a sudden start calling themselves Israel and create a new god outside the Canaanite pantheon called Yahweh. So don't have a plausible explanation for that. The reality is, what do we say at the end of the day? My answer is the settlement's a complex period. It's a very complex process. It included great military battles, certainly. It included peace treaties that we see in Joshua and some sort of slow willingness to live with indigenous Canaanites, like at Shechem or the Gibeonites. And you get some continued fighting by smaller groups that you see in the book of Judges. Exactly how that corresponds to ancient history, I'm not exactly sure. It is just very, very complicated. So I guess at the end of the day, that's what we need to learn. Settlement is a complex process.